Rafiq Abdul Mortland clearly needed to choose another career. The 38-year-old found that what he was doing for a living put him under great pressure. Well, what was his career path? Well, it was robbing stores. Robbing stores. Mortland committed a string of robberies in Hennepin County, Minnesota, and Mortland held up 8 local businesses. And during his crime spree, Mortland received the nickname the Rolaids Robber. The Rolaids Robber. And this came about after Mortland repeatedly asked store clerks for antacid tablets while the felony was in progress. So he'd be holding up the clerk and he'd say, "I need an antacid tablet to help me with this pressure." Matter of fact, that was his explanation. He was asked later why he did that, and Mortland said he needed the antacid because the job was too stressful. Robbery gave him a bad case of indigestion. Now maybe he's finally relaxing and serving his 10 years in prison. Now, I don't know about you, but I have a hard time feeling sorry for that guy. After all, what he was doing was illegal. But perhaps he should have paid more attention to the cause of the indigestion. Might there have been a connection between his illegal activity and how he was feeling internally? Can't wrong choices put us under a great deal of pressure? If you're paying attention, you'll notice in your own life the telltale symptoms of restlessness and stress, inner turmoil, stomach pain, and the inability to enjoy the blessings of God because of a guilty conscience. A guilty conscience. We may try to pretend on the outside that all is okay on the inside, but that guilt just snags at us. As John Lennon astutely wrote, "You can shine your shoes and wear a suit. You can comb your hair and look quite cute. You can hide your face behind a smile. One thing you can't hide is when you're crippled inside. You can go to church and sing a hymn, judge me by the color of my skin. You can live a lie until you die. One thing you can't hide is when you're crippled inside." And sadly, many today are crippled inside. Within the Christian community, even among the forgiven, many are suffering from the effects of guilt and shame. Yes, right around in this room. Max Lucado refers to guilt as a sack of stones. He says we take this sack of stones with us to work. We take this sack of stones with us to school. We take it with us to happy hour. Or we take this sack of stones to a counselor's office, or even to a weekend rendezvous. We even take it with us to church. In all these places, we're looking for relief of our guilt, but instead we take that same sack out the door with us, and we go through life sluggish, tired, and burdened. So there in your bag might be some guilt of pain of wasted years. And that bag that you carry around, it might be some stones of guilt of that wild living. Choices that continue to have repercussions today. In our sack, there's guilt over the time we lost our cool. In our sack of stones, there's the day you lost your innocence. There is the stone of that time you lied on your resume, or the guilt of that time when you spoke that careless, hurtful word to your parents or to a friend or to someone else. Oh, that bag that we carry around, church, can be so heavy at times. Where do we go with that guilt? Where do we go with that shame? Well, I want you to look with me at a vision given to the prophet Zechariah. You'll find it in the 3rd chapter of the book with the same name. Zechariah chapter 3. If you're wondering where Zechariah is, you can go to Matthew, the first book of the New Testament, back up to Malachi, or Malachi, the Italian prophet, depending how you look at it. But you got Malachi, and then just before Malachi, you have Zechariah. All right, so you find that, and as you're finding that book of the Old Testament, it's just before Malachi. As you turn it, let me set up Zechariah chapter 3 for you. The setting really is a court scene in which the nation of Israel is on trial. The prosecuting attorney is none other than Satan himself. The judge is God the Father, and the defense attorney is the pre-incarnate Christ, referred to here as the angel of the Lord. So that's what is set up. Prosecuting attorney, Satan. The judge is God, and the defense attorney is the pre-incarnate Christ, referred to here as the angel of the Lord. It will be really obvious that is true here in a moment. Now, Zechariah chapter 3, I hope you're there, verse 1. Verse 1. It says, "Then he showed me," meaning in this vision, "then he showed me," Zechariah is speaking, "then he showed me in a vision Joshua the high priest." Now, Joshua here represents the nation Israel. "Then he showed me Joshua the high priest standing before the Lord, and Satan standing at the right side to accuse him," meaning Joshua accused Israel. It tells us down in verse 3 that Joshua was dressed in filthy clothes, which really is an understatement. It's disgusting clothes. So the accusation, the charge against God's people is simply this: how can such a sinful people be of any use to a holy God? How can such a sinful people be of any use to a holy God? That's the accusation Satan is throwing at the nation Israel. Now listen, when Satan puts us on trial, he will lack no evidence to prove our guilt. There's plenty of material to work with. We are what he says about us and more. Even our own righteousness, it tells us in Isaiah 64:6, is as filthy rags. So what Satan says before God about Israel and their filthy garments, he can say about us. Now, what takes place next in Zechariah's vision is incredibly significant. The angel of the Lord, which I said refers to the pre-incarnate Christ, he speaks in Israel's defense. The accusations are coming. Jesus, pre-incarnate Christ, steps in Israel's defense. And notice what he doesn't say. He doesn't say, "Satan, you have it all wrong. Israel means well, and they've been good enough." He doesn't say that. He doesn't say, "What you are saying, Satan, is false." No, Zechariah chapter 3, verse 2. Notice it with me. The Lord says to Satan the accuser, "The Lord rebuke you, Satan." Which, by the way, he's the only one that can rebuke Satan. Just let's put that on the table. "The Lord rebuke you, Satan. The Lord who has chosen Jerusalem rebuke you. Is not this nation a burning stick snatched from the fire?" Then, in this vision, something powerful transpires. Those filthy garments of this high priest Joshua, who symbolizes Israel, they are taken off. They are removed. And the excrement-covered clothes are replaced with beautiful festival clothing. That's what's going on. Do you see the picture? We miss this, and we miss everything else that I'm going to say this morning. Left to ourselves before God, every one of us is guilty. We can't try and muster up enough goodness in ourselves to be of any kind of match for Satan. He is correct in his guilty charges heaped upon us. It doesn't matter how good we think we are. It doesn't matter how many self-improvement groups we join, the number of self-help books we read. I mean, they're all good for us, but it doesn't help us in terms of the accusations that Satan fires at us. It doesn't even matter, folks, how often we attend church. No amount of good deeds and self-righteousness will protect us from the accusations that Satan fires at us. I want us to get this. There is only one way we can withstand Satan's accusations. It is the righteousness of Jesus Christ. That's it. Old clothes of our guilt and sin need to be removed and replaced with new clothes of Christ's righteousness. Because Satan, the accuser, and what he says about us outside of that is very much often true. Often true. There was another court scene in San Diego Superior Court, and two men were on trial for armed robbery. An eyewitness took the stand, and the prosecutor moved carefully. The prosecutor said, "So, you say you were at the scene when the robbery took place?" The eyewitness answered, "Yes, I was." "And you saw the vehicle that left that scene at a high rate of speed?" And again, the eyewitness answered, "Yes, I did." "And did you observe the occupants in the car?" "Yes," the eyewitness replied, "there were two men." And then the prosecuting attorney asked, "And are these two men present in this courtroom today?" And before she could even answer, the two defendants sitting there raised their hands. Kind of sealed their fate, I think. As our accuser speaks of our offenses, all we can do is raise our hands and say, "Guilty as charged. Guilty as charged." But that's not the end of the story, thankfully. We have one who solved the problem of our guilt. He is our righteousness. Now, if there's one thing I want you to know as you walk away this morning, or reinforced as you walk away this morning, is that we are given the righteousness of Christ at the moment of our salvation. Believer, when Christ died, he took our sin for us, and he exchanged that, and we took his righteousness. Check out 2 Corinthians 5, verse 21. It says that plainly. The great exchange was made. He took our sin, we took his righteousness. And folks, that's a done deal. When God looks at you, believer, he sees the righteousness of Christ. See, Christ's righteousness is the ultimate defense of our own heart. Christ's righteousness is the ultimate answer to the accusations thrown at us by Satan or by others or by the voice in our own head that tells us we are useless and are not fit to be a child of God. It's been said this way. I love how this is said. I have the cover of Jesus on the book of my life. I have the cover of Jesus on the book of my life. I want you to walk away with that this morning, firmly fixed in your minds. Whereas the Apostle Paul puts in Ephesians 6, verse 14, stand firm then with the breastplate of righteousness in place. Stand firm then with the breastplate of righteousness in place. Now, 2 weeks ago, we began our summer sermon series on the pieces of the armor of God as given to us in Ephesians chapter 6. And so you can move from your place in Zechariah 3 and go on to the New Testament and turn to with me Ephesians chapter 6. So that was all introduction. Very important introduction, because we missed that. We missed everything this morning. That's why I spent time. But Ephesians chapter 6, I want you to look with me at Ephesians chapter 6. And last time, we looked at the first piece of the armor, and it was the belt of truth. Remember, 2 weeks ago. This morning, we're looking at the second piece of the armor. It's the breastplate of righteousness. Now, you will recall that the purpose behind putting on the armor of God is so that we can stand. It's mentioned 3 times in these few verses. Stand. Stand. After you've done everything, stand. And we're to stand strong. So it wasn't much of a stretch for me, or even very creative, to come up with a theme for our series, Standing Strong. Standing Strong. Standing strong in whatever we face. See, we're to put on the belt of truth so we can stand strong in the face of lies that come at us. We're to put on the second piece of the armor, the breastplate of righteousness, in order to stand strong in the face of the crippling effects of guilt. We're to stand strong, breastplate of righteousness, in the face of the crippling effects of guilt that you carried in yours. Well, let's zero in on this breastplate. What was this breastplate for the soldier? Well, don't picture medieval times and knights mounted on horses with their lances and broadswords covered in stiff forged armor from head to toe. No, Romans soldier's armor was intended to be lighter than that, and since they often would have to run great distance. And so this breastplate that they put on was made of strips of metal tied together with leather, and it went from the base of the neck to the top of the thighs. And likely there was a second piece that went around on to cover, partially anyway, the backsides. Now, no Roman soldier in his right mind would ever go into battle without his breastplate. Why? It was the breastplate that would protect his vital areas, right here. In this hand-to-hand combat, they would use short swords. We're going to look at that later on in the series. And the breastplate protected the soldier from that stab to the stomach or chest cavity. Without this piece of armor, his vital organs would be exposed, and it would be unthinkable for any soldier to have gone into battle with his vital organs unprotected. I mean, you can take a shot in the arm, you can take a shot in the soldier, you can take a shoulder, you can take a shot in the foot, and you might make it through it, you probably will. But to take a shot in this area right here, not going to end well. It could be fatal. And so the main purpose of the breastplate then was to protect the heart, the midsection where all the functional organs are. It'd be akin, I guess, to bulletproof vests that police wear. Well, that's the breastplate the soldiers of that day would put on to face the battle. Well, the second question we have then is, what is the significance of this breastplate for us? What is the significance of this breastplate for us? Well, in keeping with the picture of the soldier's breastplate that would protect his vital organs, we are to put on some protection for those vital areas as well. Spiritually, let me ask you, what is the vital area we must protect? Exactly. What does Scripture say we must guard, for it directs the course of our lives? Proverbs 4:23. The men went through this as we looked at purity over this past winter and spring. In Proverbs 4:23, it says, above all else, guard your heart, for it is the wellspring of life. Jesus said in Luke 6:45 that out of the overflow of the heart, the mouth speaks. In other words, our mouths tattle on our hearts. We can say all we want. That's not me. No, that didn't come. No, yeah, it did. From the heart. Out of the overflow of the heart, the mouth speaks. Jesus goes on even further in Matthew 15:19. He says, for out of the heart come what? Evil thoughts and murder, adultery, sexual immorality, theft, false testimony, slander. These are what make a man unclean. See, the heart, as used in Scripture, is the most comprehensive term for the person as a whole. It is the control center. The heart is what drives what we do. You have a problem with money? Jesus said, look to the heart. Money goes where your heart has already gone. That's why Jesus said, for where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. See, whatever my heart loves, the ears will hear and the eyes will see. That's why behaviorists who seek to change behavior only, they're going to come up short. Because that's like a reservoir filled with polluted liquid. And someone comes along and suggests, you know what you need to do to deal with that polluted liquid in that reservoir? You need to replace the pipes. Just replace the pipes, put in new pipes, so that this polluted water now might run through these fresh pipes. Doesn't make any sense. We must deal with the source. The problem is with the heart. Do you see why guarding and protecting the heart is so important? You see why we must put on this breastplate? Well, we have to ask then, what is this breastplate we're to put on? Starting to go down deep here. Ephesians 6:14 informs us that's the breastplate of righteousness. Righteousness. What is this righteousness Paul is speaking about? Well, hopefully by now it should be apparent that he can't be speaking about a righteousness of our own. We cannot stand on our own righteousness. That's why we looked at Zechariah 3. The accusations thrown our way would in fact stick. We need a righteousness not of ourselves. Now, interestingly enough, in Isaiah 59, verse 17, it speaks of God wearing a breastplate of righteousness. The righteousness we put on is his righteousness. Remember, that's the thing I want you to know as you leave here this morning. Not know in the sense that you didn't know this before, but know in the sense that it stays with you. That you stand strong in that truth in the face of the crippling effects of sin. Because what is that? That is called, that righteousness, theologians call it imputed righteousness. Which by faith in Jesus Christ we have credited to our account two words, not guilty. Now, sometimes in a cute way, and it's fine, we define justification just as if I didn't sin. All right, that flies to a certain point, but it kind of misses it just a little bit because I did sin. No. The beauty of justification is that I am guilty, but God comes along and says, not guilty. That's what he's saying. It's powerful. Jesus is our righteousness, and because of that, the enemy's accusations do not stick. A little boy named Timmy was constantly being picked on by this neighborhood bully. And this bully would come up to his front lawn and he would scare little Timmy half to death, and so Timmy would run into his house. One day, as this bully stood on the little boy's front yard, Timmy decided enough was enough and he was going to stand up to this bully. So Timmy didn't run. Instead, he stood his ground. And the bully suddenly backed down. Timmy could see fear all over the bully's face, and he thought to himself, man, I'm really something. And just as he was starting to feel real big, he heard a noise from behind him. Timmy turned around and noticed that his dad was standing right behind him on the front porch. You see, the bully wasn't afraid of Timmy, but of the presence of the Father. As you're being bullied by the evil one, flexing our muscles, shaking our fists at him, saying whatever we have a script to say, won't cause him to back down. Instead, it's the presence of Christ who stands in our defense, shows the enemy his wounds and his scars that provided our redemption. Only as we place our trust in Christ, his finished work on the cross, that we can meet the struggles of life with confidence that we are forgiven, we are secure, and our bag of guilt has been paid for and lifted from us. Likely you're familiar with the famous ink spot on the wall of Wartburg Castle, Germany. It was said that that ink spot was there because Martin Luther had it out with the devil over the evil one's constant dredging up of Luther's past sins. And the story is told that Luther dreamt that Satan appeared to him reading a long scroll with all his many sins from his birth on. And as the reading of the list proceeded, Luther's terrors grew until finally he jumped up and he cried, "It's all true, Satan. Everything you say about me is true, and many more are committed in my life which are known to God only. It's all true." I want you to write at the bottom of your list these words: "The blood of Jesus Christ, God's Son, cleanses us from all sin." And then grasping the inkwell on his table, he threw it at the devil, who immediately fled, as the story goes. We have a place to go with our guilt and the beating up of ourselves. We need to remember that as the guilt in the bag begins to weigh us down, that the blood of Jesus Christ cleanses us from all sin, and we are right with God. Church, believe that to be true. That when God looks at you, believer, He sees the righteousness of Christ. You always have that righteousness. See, it's absolutely critical as we talk about putting on the breastplate of righteousness that protects the heart, that our starting point is the righteousness of Jesus Christ. But you know, there's a second aspect of this righteousness that we need to look at as well. It is equally critical to our standing strong in the face of the crippling effects of guilt. The fourth question is, what are we to do in light of this righteousness that we have been given? What are we to do in light of this righteousness we have been given? Since it is true that our position of righteousness is secure forever, how then are we to live? What difference should that make? It's a question having to do with our sanctification. I know that's a big word. That's just the process of living out our faith. See, the first aspect of our righteousness that I've been talking about speaks to our position in Christ. The second aspect addresses how we live that out. Sanctification. Now, one of the best and simplest definitions of sanctification is this: becoming in practice what we already are in position. That's it. Becoming in practice what we already are in position. That's sanctification. We are to live in light of who we are. We are declared what? Not guilty. What God asks us to do is to live in light of what He has done. We're righteous. We are then to live as righteous people. The breastplate is on when we are living as righteous people. The breastplate is on when we are living as righteous people. So when we get sloppy in our walk with the Lord, when there's unaddressed guilt in our lives, when we choose to remain in our sin, when our pride and our stubbornness prevent us from coming clean, we're walking around without our breastplates. When there are unrighteous attitudes, and there's unholy living, and there's unwholesome talk flowing from our mouths, we have taken the breastplate off, and we are vulnerable to sin just eating us up, and guilt just eating us alive, and taking us down. Now listen, guilt is a good thing. Guilt is a good thing. Guilt is to the conscience what pain is to the body. It tells us that something is wrong. If we choose not to listen to the guilt, then it's going to take an enormous amount of energy and physical effort to just keep suppressing it. You see, guilt is good, but we need to guilt well. Not like the shoplifter who wrote a letter to a department store and said, you know, I've just become a Christian and I can't sleep at night because I feel guilty. Here's $100 that I owe you. Then he signs his name, a little postscript at the bottom he adds, and if I still can't sleep, I'll send you the rest. That's not what we're talking about. To guilt well is more than just relieving our conscience. It is to be honest about the sin and do the right thing, do the righteous thing. You know, not too long ago, so I was driving my Camry, the oil light on the dashboard came on telling me that my oil was low. So I took a piece of black tape and I put it over that light so I didn't have to see it anymore. And I just kept driving. So far, so good? No, not really. I didn't do that. You're going, you're not very smart. Well, I'm not, but in this case, that's not what I did. See, guilt has been likened to the red light on our internal dashboard. When the light goes on, whatever that light may be, you have a choice to make. You can deal with it, Or maybe you could smash the light with a hammer and keep driving the car. First option may not be pleasant to deal with it, but identifies and resolves the problem. The second option of just smashing and putting tape over it only relieves the symptoms, but will likely leave you stranded further down the road. Let me ask you, do you need to do business with the red lights on your internal dashboard? They're going on. Guilt. Deal with the sin. Be honest about it. Repent. Guilt. See, to ignore it is to leave your heart unprotected. What will unconfessed sin and unaddressed guilt do to your heart? It's going to eventually leave you stranded further down in the road of life. Deal with it now. It's only going to cripple you inside, making you ineffective for the Lord. See, it's what we do with that guilt that's the difference between making progress or leaving us stranded. Because if things aren't right in your life, listen, the first place to look is your righteousness. The breastplate is on is when we're living righteous, holy lives. Many years ago, a survey was taken among Christians as to the reason they don't witness. And I would have guessed that the top reason would have been something like, I'm afraid to witness, or I don't want to be rejected when I witness, or I don't feel equipped to witness, or I don't have many friends now who are unsaved that I really hang out with. I kind of thought that some of those would be at the top. None of them are at the top. Do you know the overwhelming reason that a person doesn't witness according to this survey? The number one reason was, I don't witness because of the life I live. It might be holding you back. The breastplate, then, is not on. The breastplate is on. It's when we're living a righteous life. Now, we need to get real practical. We need to get real practical here. What do I want you to know from this sermon? Well, I already said it. We're given the righteousness of Christ at the moment of our salvation. I want you to leave away that fixed in your mind. We have the righteousness of Christ. We've been given the righteousness of Christ at the moment of salvation. Have it forever. It can't be taken away. What do I want you to do with it? Well, I just said, live as righteous people. Speaking to myself. Live as righteous people. Live in light of what we are. So, what are some practical ways we do that? Well, there are many. And I had a long list, and I finally said, no. I don't really want to make up their minds for them. But I do want to give you a practical step. It's a preventative step. Because I think so often in the battles of life, they overtake us because we have done very little advanced planning. Now, as I said, we put on the breastplate of righteousness by protecting the heart. God puts a premium on the guarded heart. We got to put this keep out private property sign on our hearts. That doesn't mean you keep everything and everyone out. It's letting the right things in and keeping the wrong things out. So here's the practical step for us in putting on the breastplate of righteousness. Here it is, preventative. It's to ask before every decision, every activity, every response, this question: what will this do to my heart? I want you to figure that out yourself. I give you a long list. Not helpful. We need to ask before every decision, every activity, every response, every time before we send out that email or that text or whatever else, we're in the back seat of the car with someone. What is this going to do to my heart? Gotta ask that. What will this do to my heart? Whatever this is, what will it do to my heart? Is it going to cool me off toward the Lord? Will this move me closer to Him? Is this going to distract me from His call on my life? Is this going to help me to delight in Him? Is this going to pollute the wellspring within, or will it produce an overflow of the living water that Jesus spoke about? What will this do to my heart, the control center of my life? Well, you ask that very simple question. What will this do to my heart? At seemingly harmless flirtations with someone other than my spouse, what will this do to my heart? that dating of an unbeliever, what will this do to my heart? That reading of that novel, that TV show that is a must-see for me, that lingering on some web page, that place where I love to hang out, that purchase, what will this do to my heart? The question is not, can I get by with this? The question is not, how close to the line can I get? Wrong questions. What will this do to my heart? To my affection for Jesus Christ. Just as a soldier in his right mind would never think about going out on the battlefield without his breastplate, neither should we think we can even survive the battles of life if we keep giving our heart away to other affections. We won't make it. We won't make it. We are to live in light of what we've been given. We've been given the righteousness of Christ. Live as righteous people. That's standing strong in the face of the guilt cripples us. Guilt, well, let it lead us to the cross. Let it move us to acknowledging our sin. For the enemy is looking, folks, to keep us crippled inside, overwhelmed with guilt and shame, so that we start to believe that we are of no use to the Lord. As elders, we identified just recently, perhaps, a reason that people are not getting more involved in the church is because of guilt and shame. It's crippling them. It's worth thinking about. You may know that Sir Arthur Conan Doyle was the writer of Sherlock Holmes novels. What you might not know is that he was quite the prankster. And one day, Conan Doyle played a practical joke on 5 of the most prominent men in England. He sent an anonymous note to these 5 prominent men that said, "All is found out. Flee at once." All is found out. Flee at once. And within 24 hours, all 5 men had left the country. Now, Doyle knew nothing of any secrets that these men had. He played on the assumption that everyone has secrets, and those secrets usually lead to tremendous feelings of guilt. Church, we don't have to live that way. We don't have to live that way. We don't have to remain in our guilt. We don't have to be crippled inside because somebody has already paid to lift it off of us. As the hymn writer put it so well, Jesus paid it all. All. Not some. Whatever it is that you have in that bag of guilt, it's weighing you down, beg of you, give it to Christ. Don't let it eat you alive. Don't let it keep you from serving, from witnessing. Will you believe what he has said is true of you? You are declared, believer, not guilty. Believer, that is what you are, not guilty. Now live in light of what we are. Live as righteous people. We've got to have the breastplate on. Will you look to protect your heart this week? Will you ask along the way this one question: what will this do to my heart? What will this do